Hi, I'm Carrie Jacobson with Jacobson Family Law, where we keep the drama out of your divorce. Thank you for joining me again today for Finance Friday. And today we will be talking about alimony in Maryland. How is it calculated? And alimony is something that is completely state specific. So there are different rules here in Maryland versus other states. So specifically today, we will be discussing how alimony is calculated or not calculated here in Maryland. Thank you for joining us. If you have questions, please be sure to put those in the chat. You can always leave them in the comments later so we can circle back to you. So again, we're talking about alimony. Sometimes people refer that as to alimony as spousal maintenance. And really there are different types of alimony here in Maryland. So I want to share this a little bit more. So depending on the jurisdiction, again, here in Maryland, we have three common types of alimony. And the first is permanent or indefinite alimony. This is a form that continues indefinitely until the recipient spouse, the person receiving the alimony, either remarries, sometimes it could be cohabitates, that's something that can be negotiated into an agreement, or if there's an experience of significant change in circumstances, and that could include either spouse passing away. The second common alimony type in Maryland, and this is probably the most common, is something referred to as rehabilitative alimony. And that aims to support the recipient spouse for a specific duration, providing financial assistance while they acquire either education, additional skills, or training to become self-supporting. So where we see this most common is a scenario where maybe the recipient spouse has been out of the workforce for a period of time. And they need to get recertified or get additional training so that they can enter back into the workforce and earn a higher income. So that is a common type of alimony here in Maryland, and what is, I would say, probably the most common. And usually it's a scenario where maybe that recipient spouse is going to receive a monthly sum for a period of time. And so the duration of that is something that has to be determined either through negotiations or if it's something that's going before a court that a judge would make a decision on. The other type of alimony that we commonly see here in Maryland is something referred to as temporary alimony. We often hear it referred to here in Maryland as pendente lite alimony, which is something that is awarded during the divorce proceedings. And it is meant to provide immediate financial support until a final alimony decision is reached. So this would be a scenario where maybe there is current litigation, the case has been filed in court, and it is a temporary alimony amount that is being paid, because many times litigation can take anywhere from a year to 2 years for a case to be finalized if it's going to trial before a judge. And so during that temporary period, oftentimes there's a scenario where the recipient spouse needs alimony in order to be able to meet his or her needs. And so the court can, during a pendente lite hearing, order that a spouse pay pendente lite alimony. And the standard for calculating that is different than the standard for calculating a full and final alimony award. Typically, when we're looking at pendente lite alimony, we are looking at what are the needs of the recipient spouse and what is the ability to pay of the paying spouse. So that's where your financial statements and your budgets that we talked about in our prior video really come into play. Another thing to really know is that Maryland is completely subjective as to how alimony is calculated. So there are many factors a court has to look at to determine what alimony is going to be, but ultimately it's up to the decision of the judge who's making the award. So some of the factors that the court will take into consideration are going to be the duration of the marriage. how long have the parties been married? So if they've only been married for a couple of years, that's going to look drastically different than if the parties have been married for 10, 15, or even 20 years. The other factor the court's going to look at is the income and earning capacity of each spouse. So again, if someone is making $200,000 and the recipient spouse is only earning 50, the question is, how long is it going to take for that $50,000 spouse to get the education or training that he or she needs in order to earn a higher salary and able to support him or herself? And the court's looking at all different income sources, whether it's wages, your self-employment income, investments, the potential future earnings that you may have are all significant factors. Again, we go back to financial needs. So looking at what the needs of the recipient spouse are, and these are reasonable things, not, how much does it cost to for that person to live in a luxury 5-bedroom house, but what is it for them to, maintain their household. The standard of living during the marriage can be a factor that the court will look at. And if, the family is used to taking significant trips, or if they are used to living in that, 5-bedroom luxury house, that may be a consideration for the judge to look at. The age and health of the parties is going to be a factor that the court considers, as well as the contributions each party made during the marriage. So these are going to be both financial contributions, did one spouse have significant earnings, but also non-financial. So did one spouse stay at home and raise the children and being responsible for the household while the other spouse traveled? Things that what led to the demise of the marriage or fault-based considerations can be a factor that the court considers. So if there was adultery, physical abuse, emotional abuse, any of those things can be something that the court considers, as well as if there are financial resources either party may have access to that is not necessarily a marital asset. So where this comes in is, does one spouse have access to an inheritance, for example, that may not be money that's going to be split between the parties, but that they can access to tap into those resources to be self-supporting? And the custody arrangements can potentially be a factor that the court considers when making a determination of alimony. So all of these things can impact an alimony award. And what I commonly tell our clients is that you can have 5 judges hear the same exact fact pattern and all of the same exact evidence and come up with 5 different scenarios on what they would rule. Because just even though they have to go through all of these different factors, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will weigh each of those factors the same. So that's what makes alimony in Maryland very complicated when trying to negotiate what might be an appropriate award. If you have questions about your particular situation and whether or not you qualify for alimony, whether or not you may need to pay your spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse alimony, you can reach out to us and we would be happy to have a conversation about what that might look like and help you guide you through that process. Additionally, we have, referring to during my presentation, an e-course called Securing Your Financial Future, the Essential Guide to Alimony. And so you can check that out on our stand store and get additional information about how to negotiate alimony, whether or not you can enforce it, how it can be modified or potentially terminated. We hope you have a great weekend. Bye-bye.